All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Me here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you, just like me. Um, the battle for relevance between Styx and Dennis DeYoung. For us folks who are following this, and I've been following it now for a few years, and I've been a little disappointed with the behavior of the band Styx. They call themselves Styx. Um, they should call it Styx, featuring the music of Dennis DeYoung. I think that would be fitting. I wish Dennis had negotiated that, but obviously he gets to say Dennis DeYoung performing the music of Styx. Uh, and everybody wants that branding, right? They want it because it draws more fans. And Dennis DeYoung has an album coming out soon, I believe in June, right around June 21st. He's got a single out called Isle of Misanthrope, which basically is a very authentic recreation of the Styx Crystal Ball Equinox period of the band. Remember, Dennis is supposed to be a washed up crooner with no gas left in his writing tank, the guy who just writes schmaltzy ballads, but yet somehow he's been able to write songs that sound much like Styx tunes. Of course, he has written some ballads like To the Good Old Days, which, quite honestly, is what Styx was all about. They were rockers and ballads. Uh, they were songs that defied their older sound, like on Mr. Roboto, which emulated the era, Thomas Dolby and Devo and Howard Jones, occupying some space. And quite honestly, it was a period piece and it worked quite well. Culturally speaking, it's probably one of the band's biggest songs. Concept albums, Paradise Theater, and The Grand Illusion. Dennis DeYoung is still singing about the Grand Illusion, whereas Styx is trying to create a new narrative about space travel, and which is fine. Elon Musk, hey, I get it. UFOs out there, according to the government. So Styx cashing in on what's happening these days and what's been happening now, maybe for a few decades. And that's fine. I liked the last Styx album. I liked Mission to Mars. It's a good record. It would have been a better record if Dennis DeYoung was there to help write it. However, he wasn't. And these guys continued to kind of dismiss Dennis and say, hey, he's a nice guy. He's a smart guy. Well, he's not a nice guy, but he's a smart guy. And he just doesn't fit because he broke the band up. I think actually Lawyers broke the band up in 1998. I think Lawyers had more to do with it than personalities. Dennis is not all that hard to work with. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a touring band that's been with him now for what? Probably over a decade. And you would hear comments from various people, or it would have been a revolving door, which it hasn't been. Obviously, there was a power struggle between Dennis, Tommy, and JY. JY, though, came back to Dennis back in 1990-ish or 91 when the band returned to form and got into the top 10 again with a tune called Show Me the Way. But it wasn't enough for the band to continue into the 90s, obviously with a changing music scene. But a reunited lineup, of course, in the mid-90s made for the Return to Paradise and for the return to lots of revenue. But then, Dennis got sick and got light sensitive and had a really bad virus of all things. Yeah, back in the 90s. Maybe that was the first coronavirus. Don't know. But in any event, it left Dennis colorblind, I believe. I think he's colorblind, and I think he had real issues with light sensitivity. It's a shame because the band, again, wasn't willing to hang out and see what Dennis wanted to do. This wasn't a Steve Perry situation. Dennis wanted back in. He just needed time. The boys didn't want to wait. They wanted to continue on. And they've created a few different narratives to describe Dennis as recalcitrant, somebody who's difficult to deal with. That's really the premise. If you listen to the big interview with Dan Rather and Tommy Shaw, and basically Tommy says, "Hey, I just want to be happy," and I wasn't happy with this Dennis guy. Dennis ruined Styx, even though Dennis was the creative force in Styx. The narrative is that Dennis ruined Styx, and he was a difficult person to work with, and he didn't want to tour, and he didn't want to create real rock music. Whereas we testosterone boys, myself and JY, we're the ones that really want to rock out. Whereas Dennis, if you listen to this Isle of Misanthrope song, if you listen to the material off of 26 East Volume 1, there are just no rockers to be found, right? Nothing. Just schmaltzy, Liza Minnelli type ballads. False, wrong. Dennis can create the hard rock stuff and the proggy stuff just as much as he can create those schmaltzy ballads that sold millions and millions of copies that, you know, radio is still onto even now. Most of the focus tested stuff that's been focus tested out, you know, is stuff that's more on the fringes with Styx. Whereas the Dennis stuff, you know, the stuff that went top 10, or in the case of Babe, went all the way to number 1, that stuff is still on the radio. Soft rock stations, yeah. But Styx, they don't want to be a soft rock band anymore. Even though when they shop their new Mission to Mars or whatever it's going to be, it's not going to be played on mainstream stations. Styx in the time capsule is going to be remembered mostly for their Dennis DeYoung material, with some exceptions like Renegade and Blue Collar Man and some other Tommy Shaw tunes. But Dennis DeYoung, he's the creative force. He was, he still can be. All Dennis is looking for in this battle toward the end here is just a little farewell. Just like, hey, this is what we did together. It was pretty cool. I'd like to be a part of the ending. I felt as though, you know, things didn't go well back in 98. You know, the guys in Styx are still maintaining, hey, he sued us. He sued us for us kicking him out of the band. And that's just a weird argument. We wanted no part of Dennis DeYoung, and we basically hired lawyers to get him out of the band. And then Dennis said, well, wait a minute. Much like Steve Perry did with Journey, wait a minute. I don't think Dennis gets a cut of anything Styx does these days. I think he deserves it, though, because they're out there performing a lot of his music. And even Mr. Roboto, of course, they do a rocked up version of it because we can't play it the way it was recorded because that's too schmaltzy. It's too 1983. Why would we want to do that, even though the song has been used in commercials and, you know, all kinds of other pop culture programming? You might hear Mr. Roboto or a snippet from it. It's probably one of the most recognized tunes by Styx, but they can't have that in their legacy. At least they can't play it like it was recorded, because that would mean that they're admitting that the song is catchy and fun and people like it. Look, people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and maybe 70s, they're kind of over this feud between the proggy hard rock version of Styx, which there never really was. All right, there was a lot of 12-string and acoustic guitars, and it was very listenable material for the most part. It wasn't stuff that made your ears bleed. Yeah, there was more muscular Styx tunes, but then there were more ballad-oriented Styx tunes, and the narrative up until Kilroy was that this band was kind of all over the place, and it was okay. People could coexist and live peaceably and understand that Styx was many different things, and that was okay. It was a collage. It was a tapestry of sorts. But, you know, now it's been redefined that Dennis is just a Liza Minnelli crooning old timer who doesn't even like to play the part of being a rock star. And that's been part of what Dennis has been for a long time. He doesn't really want to play the part of a rock star. He is a writer, a composer, an arranger, a guy who I think is deeper musically than just being part of a rock band that's attempting to redefine themselves into Pink Floyd when they're really not. Even on a good day, you know, that you can't compare them to some of the super heavy hitter progressive bands because they were more than that. They weren't Yes, you know, they weren't Kansas, although they're similar to Kansas at times, but they're just a different kind of band. And they sold lots of records when they crossed over and they were able to make their music more accessible to more people. I mean, you could do both. This is the thing that drives me crazy is you can do both and admit that you do both and be comfortable doing both. I get it that Tommy and JY aren't comfortable with that, but they weren't comfortable. They weren't uncomfortable, rather, cashing the damn checks. They were pretty happy cashing the checks. And the reason they were able to cash checks is because Dennis wrote great material and they could combine and write great material. That's why they made lots of money. And that's why they're able to continue even now, even though they're mismatched out on the road with Collective Soul. And see, this is their persona nowadays, is we're going to go out there and we're going to continue to reinvent ourselves. And like the fans of Collective Soul are going to dig Styx. That's not a good matchup. That's worse than what happened during Roboto when they were out there with, I don't know, Iron Maiden or somebody. I can't remember. But supposedly the fans were throwing stuff on stage and they were so outraged that Styx was doing theater up there. And yeah, maybe in hindsight, that wasn't a great idea. Maybe Dennis will tell you we should have had a better booking agent. You know, I don't know. But, you know, Collective Soul and Styx, that makes no sense. Night Ranger and Styx, that makes sense. Styx and REO Speedwagon, that makes sense. Collective Soul doesn't make sense, but you know, whatever. This has been the whole issue with Styx. They're kind of just trying to always distance themselves from their past, and there's nothing wrong with their past. Their past is why people show up to concerts. They're not going to see just the Mission to Mars and the new album. And I will, when that new album comes out, I will review it honestly and fairly. Just like I said, I liked Mission to Mars, but I also like 26 East Volume 1, and I'll probably like 26 East Volume 2. This is the thing that if you're a Styx fan, can you at least admit that Dennis isn't so bad these days, that he's actually doing some pretty interesting material? And to partner with a guy like Jim Peterick shows that he's real savvy. And Chicago, by the way, is doing the same thing these days. They're working with Jim Peterick on new music and new material. Bombshell, not really, but I think I reported that after I did the interview with Jim Peterick. Look, you can't fault Dennis for working with another genius arranger, songwriter. But anyway, that's my little rant on this. Some of the patrons have been asking me to do a video about this situation. And is it a coincidence that Styx is releasing material and going out on tour when Dennis is putting his last finishing touch on his career? I don't think it's a coincidence. I just think it's what Styx wants to do these days. The timing, I'm sure they'll deny it. If you were to ask them and say, no, we're waiting for the okay to go out on tour from the smart people in the world who've been wrong for quite some time about pretty much everything. But that's, you know, another commentary for another platform. So in any event, thanks for watching these videos. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. And yes, you can help me out over on Patreon for $1 a month. If you go on Patreon, there are exclusives there, uh, other things that you can watch by me that you can't watch here. And I direct you as to where to find those things. So I appreciate you hanging out, and I will see you soon.